All right, Austin, cheers.
Cheers.
Nice. Yeah, man. We should have drunk this a couple weeks earlier, but it's still pretty nice.
Yeah.
This is the sake that woman in Jiyugaoka just bought us on the fly.
Yeah, it's kind of we were just out there with the families, and one of our fans just happened to see you right before I met you.
Yeah.
And she ran over and got you a bottle to drink on the channel.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
Yeah. So just to tell you guys, we actually made a wish list for our sake. So if you want to buy sake to come to us, then please do that, and we'll say thank you on the channel. I think that's easier. It's the easiest way to send it.
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
Yeah, so today though, Austin, I want to talk to you. I wanted to talk about a topic that we talked over lunch about.
Yeah.
But that was the naming traditions of our families and maybe families in the States.
Yeah, so, I think a really common thing is people always ask Japanese people what their name means.
Yeah, right?
Like trying to think of something like Haruko.
Haruko, yeah.
For example.
Cool. What does Haruko mean?
Yeah, so, it means spring child.
Yeah.
Right? And you have Natsuko, you have Akiko, you have Yuko. You don't really see Fuko.
You do have a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so like you see these, or like another one, like a really famous person, Ichiro Suzuki. So Ichiro is typically like a boy's name, and it means first child.
Yeah.
But you don't see women being named Ichiro.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think like in the older generations, for the boys, they would always get the names of like what number child they were, like.
Yeah.
Like what, Sanzaburo or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I remember when what was it like? Yeah, I don't remember, but it was very interesting how it's like, oh yeah, you're child number 1, you're child number 2,
Yeah, I mean it fits here, but yeah, it's kind of funny if you like sit down and think about it, like really, that's you just had no creativity there. You just wanted to go number 1, number 2.
Yeah. It's interesting that I haven't thought about this topic before, because actually for the longest time, one of my most viewed blog posts on my website was, why do foreigners have middle names?
Yeah. So do you want, we can open up and talk about that.
Yeah.
I think that's a good kind of opening point, because I think a lot of people get like really confused. Like, why do you have a middle name? Because you don't use it.
Yeah. Well, there aren't really middle names in Japan.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. So, there's a couple reasons why someone might have a middle name. First of all, I know we'll jump into the whole biblical problem or biblical discussion on that, but there's another thing that is especially really common in Europe, and I think if you extend it over to the Middle East, you will see it there, is titles.
Yeah.
So this is not so much common in Europe today, but if you go back a few hundred years or several hundred years, it was a very common thing, especially among nobles, where a person will have titles. So, their name will be John, but they'll also have a title, maybe their position, like maybe they're an earl, or maybe they're, like some kind of higher up position. They'll also have a title, maybe they're from York. So it'll be John of York. Yeah. Right. So it's like you see that like everywhere in Europe, where they'll have specific titles to something they did, a job position they have, where they're from, what family they're part of. And so there's a lot of names that get attached to a person through that. And then we have what's more common these days, like known as Bible names.
Bible names. Okay.
Right. And so, especially in European culture, but this also extends to American culture, is you will have a person with their name, and then their middle name is typically a name chosen from the Bible.
Really?
Yeah.
It's funny because you were saying we'll get into the biblical thing, and I had no clue what you were talking about. No.
Yeah. So Bible names. I'm gonna be guy-splaining. I think
guy-splaining, okay,
like kind of like mansplaining, I guess. But what I mean is like guy speak, where I don't know how accurate this is. But I'm gonna do my rough.
It's okay, man. You're wrong on a lot of things, and just keep on going. It's fine.
But yeah, so basically my understanding of biblical names is they started with, trying to get people from different cultures into Christianity. And some of these people are from different countries where their names would not match what's in the Bible, right? And the Bible has very specific names that are used, right? Yeah. And so to kind of indoctrinate these people and to try to get them to maybe what they sound more Christian, they would be given a Bible name.
Okay.
So for example, like I have a Bible name. It's James.
James
is a Bible name.
Okay.
And
that's your middle name, right?
Yes. Yeah. And it's a really common thing. And
Austin James Powers.
Yeah. That's totally my last name.
Yeah.
But yeah, so in the Christian sense, or maybe you're talking with priests or people at a church or a parish, they would be referred to by their Bible name.
Okay, yeah.
So they would go, maybe they're recruiting in like, I don't know, maybe they're like Southeast Asia, and they have like a local name, but the person goes by John.
Okay.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. So it's funny that you mentioned that, because I remember, the naming traditions for everyone is different according to culture, which makes sense. But I remember I had a friend from Venezuela, and he always complained because his full name could never fit on his credit card.
Yeah.
Because when in Venezuela, when you are a child, you actually receive both of your parents' last names. Yeah. Your hyphen from the beginning, and you also get like one name from each side of the family as your two middle names. Yeah. So you have a super long name.
I think that actually comes from Spain.
Okay.
Because I think Spain's got a really similar thing, because I know like you know Pablo Picasso.
Yeah.
Like everyone does. But if you look at that man's full name, dude, it's like a paragraph.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. His name is super long.
Okay.
And it goes like with his family names and everything, and then his titles and everything are also attached to that.
Yeah. So I guess for at least for as far as we know, is that those names and a lot of these naming traditions were kind of made to show you who you belong to or where you've come from.
Yeah, it was definitely used as a status thing. Yeah. Right? You would see a long time ago, it's not applicable today, but a long time ago you would have like a person who's a peasant.
Yeah.
And it would just be like Steve of Hampshire.
Yeah, Steve of Hampshire. Or and also people would be named after their jobs. So like John Blacksmith.
Yeah. Yeah. So like my family, actually.
Miller, yeah.
Yeah. So
not Powers, Miller.
Yeah. Yeah. My name is in fact not Powers.
Yeah.
So Miller actually comes from Germany.
From Germany.
From Muller.
Muller. Okay. Müller.
Yeah. So there's two paths that Miller came from. And apparently like the very, very old version is Muller. But then that came up to the UK, Britain, and then my family's from Ireland, so it transferred over. I just found out recently. Anyways, I'm not gonna get into that. Anyways, but yeah, so in the past, millers would be people taking care of a windmill, and there was two important things they made. One was bread.
Yeah.
The other was beer.
Oh, really? They did beer too?
Yeah, because I mean, it makes sense, right? They're the ones with all the yeast.
Yeah, the yeast and the grain. Yeah.
Yeah. So they usually were in charge of making bread and yeast, or bread and beer.
Yeah.
And they're usually pretty well off. So that's
of
cool.
Course. I mean, you're the people who make the bread, Yeah, I think when you think about it, back in like old European towns, you had of course you had farmers, but you also had specialists for each trade in a town. So it's like, in York, right? Oh yeah, that's Tom the blacksmith. Oh, that's Austin the miller, Austin Miller, and that's how it became like that.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. So my family is Greek, right? And my name does not really fit with traditional Greek last names, because a lot of Greek last names come from either your father's name or it comes from the town you were in. So a lot of Greek names end in like Poulos, Andropoulos or something like that. Yeah. And my name is Zetas, Zets.
So that's really common. It sounds like that's very similar with like Nordic naming, because Nordic naming goes off of the like Davidson, for example.
Davidson or Samson.
Son of David, son of Sam.
Yeah.
Right.
Erickson. Son of Eric.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That was really common with Nordic society.
Yeah.
So
what I found is crazy is was it in I think it's Norway, where because of that, the boys in the family and the girls of the family have different last names because
really?
Because if the father's name is Friedrich, right, the son would be Friedrichsson and the daughter would be Friedrichsdotter.
Oh wow! Yeah. Oh my God, that must be just absolutely confusing over there.
But also in like Eastern European traditions too, like you know, nani Vich, V-I-C-H.
Yeah,
that means son.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So you have that. I mean, so my name Zetas is kind of like no one really knows where it comes from, but all the Zetases are related. My dad went to Greece to try to look at his family tree, and he met a guy named Zetas.
Yeah.
And the guy was like, yeah, we just have the same name. We're not related, but I'll help you find your family. And it turns out they were related. So, but the cool thing about my name though is that, so my full name is Arthur Louis Zetas. And in the Greek tradition, to kind of show where you belong, to which family line you belong to, the middle name is the father's name. So my father's name is Louis, so my middle name is Louis.
Oh, it's interesting.
And then the firstborn son gets the name of the grandfather.
Okay.
So
man, that is hard to track.
Yeah. So my grandfather, so my great grandfather, when he came to America, was named Elias Athanasios Zetas, which he changed it to Louis Arthur Zetas, and he had two sons, but the firstborn son was my grandfather.
Yeah.
So Louis Arthur Zetas becomes Arthur Louis Zetas, and then my dad is the firstborn son. He gets his grandfather's name, so that's Louis Arthur Zetas, and I'm the firstborn son in my family, so I switch it from Louis Arthur Zetas. I'm Arthur Louis Zetas. So the firstborn sons of all of the family have that switch between the first and last name.
Yeah.
So like in Japan, my firstborn son, his name is Luis Asa, right?
Yeah.
Because we have to continue the tradition. So we have like when we submit our passports, like we have Zetas Asa Luis and Zetas Luis Asa, and people think we're joking at first, but that's just how it is.
That's funny.
But the thing is you know, this was such like this is a unique tradition, and everyone in my family, other than my dad's line, has had only girls. And I remember being a young kid, and my dad was like, "Hey, Arthur, it's your job to pass on the name of Zetas, because if you don't, our line ends." And like I felt so much pressure from this, even at 10 years old, before I even knew like what sex was, you know?
Yeah. You know, it's funny you bring up the whole taking on the name thing, because I was actually really surprised to see that Japan does that also.
Oh, they do?
Well, taking on last names, like for women.
Yeah.
I thought that was an English only thing.
Yeah.
And then, well, I should say European only thing.
Yeah.
And then when the first time I came to Japan here, I noticed that married couples, like the woman would often take the man's last name. I think that's still the most common thing here in Japan and here or over in America. But I think probably in the past 20 or 30 years, there's been a lot of pushback against that.
Well, you know, something that was amazing that it didn't rock my world, but it was very surprising to me was, so one of my professors at Aogaku, when I was teaching there, I won't say his last name for privacy, but he had a last name, starts with O.
Okay.
And when I met him a few years later, I said, "Hey, O Sensei." And he's like, "No, my name isn't O Sensei. My name is K Sensei." I'm like, "What happened?" He's like, "Well, my wife's side of the family, they don't have any male heirs to keep the family going. So I took on her last name so I can keep the family going."
Oh, wow.
And like, that's not the only time I've heard of that happening, you know? But it's very interesting that happens sometimes.
That is interesting.
Yeah. But one thing that I thought was kind of cool is, you know, Japanese people talk about how there are no middle names in Japan, but I actually think there are.
Okay. I want to explain.
And I don't think it's for everyone. I think it's mainly for the nobility.
Okay.
So, how much about, let's take Tokugawa Ieyasu, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So his name was Tokugawa Ieyasu. And what was one of his descendants' name? Tokugawa Iemori.
Okay.
And what you do is you see in his line of the family, even like the current heir of the Tokugawa family, the first half of his name starts with Ie, right? And it's the same thing with Oda Nobunaga. You had like Oda Nobunaga, and his brother's name was Oda Nobukatsu or something like that. So that Nobu was the same thing. So what it was is it's almost like that first part of your name comes from the line of the family you're from. Yeah. And then your real name is kind of like the second half of that. You know? That's why there's 2 kanji for each of the names, you know?
Ah, wow. Yeah, I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, but it's not like that now. It's just
an
old thing.
Yeah. Another thing that I think is really commonly asked, so like, you know, kind of what we were originally talking about in the beginning of the episode of like, what do your names mean?
Yeah.
Right. So we talked about last names, where European last names are typically job related or location or passing down usually your father's name.
Yeah.
But first names have a lot of meaning too.
Yeah. So how did you get your name?
So, I mean, my parents gave me my name, like they just chose it, but the word Austin comes from Augustus. And if you don't know who Augustus is, Augustus Caesar, he was
the guy who made the month of August.
Yeah, the guy who made a month after his name.
Yeah.
So yeah, it comes from Augustus Caesar. But where does Augustus come from? Well, it comes from I want to say it goes back all the way to the Roman word for strength.
Yeah, strong, honorable.
Yeah, it basically it was the word for lion. Yeah. But lion comes from like strong and honorable. Yeah. And so like that's where the origin of that name comes from. But it's really crazy that we get like Augustus, August, Austin.
Yeah, right. Well, you know, it's kind of interesting. So my name too, right?
Yeah.
So my name Arthur. Like that's just the anglicized version, the English-ified version of Athanasios, which is a Greek name. Yeah. And
I always thought Arthur came from.
Oh no, well Arthur comes from something else. But if you were to like,
okay, so it's like the bastardized version.
Well, it's like everybody named Athanasios when they came to America and they wanted to blend in. They called themselves Arthur. Yeah, basically.
All right, congratulations. I don't want to pronounce your name.
Yeah. So this like rocked my world when I found this out. But so the word Athanasios means immortal, and so it's not connected to the word Arthur at all. But the word Arthur actually means bear or bear-like.
Does it?
Yeah, I know, it's weird, right? Huh. Because I looked this up because I didn't believe it at first.
Well, you are quite bear-like.
I am kind of bear-like. Whenever I was in Capitol Hill and people were like, "Oh, is it Bear Week yet?" or something. but yeah, so you know, we actually have the word the Arctic, like Arctic Circle.
Yeah,
you know, and that actually comes from the Ursa Major and Ursa Minor constellations, the bear constellations up in the north.
Oh, so
up to the north, because it's where the bears live. And apparently the Greek word for bear is Arctos also.
Yes.
And so, but there was this tradition in English where if you call something directly by its name, you give it power.
Yep.
So when you would go hunt bears or something, you wouldn't actually call it its name. You would call it by a nickname.
Yeah.
So they would call it the brown one, which became the word bear.
That's fun.
Isn't that fun?
That is fun.
Yeah. It's kind of like how the pronunciation changes, you know? But do you know why your family chose James out of all the names?
So I've asked my parents about this several times, and it was my understanding that I can't remember who. It was either my mom wanted Austin and my dad wanted James, or it was the opposite. So I'm sure they're going to watch this video and tell me I'm wrong. Yeah. So but yeah, so it was that. And I was actually going to be Natalie if I was a girl.
If you were a girl, I'm so glad you're not a Natalie now. Well, the Natalie does suit you a little bit.
I don't know.
I mean, you could be if you go back to the States.
I've never liked the name Natalie, to be honest.
Because, Natalie makes me think of Natty or like a gnat.
I always think of Nat.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you always, like, if you meet somebody named Natalie, that's usually their nickname. And I don't want to be the nickname of a bug.
Yeah, I know.
Just,
and have you ever met a nice Natalie before?
I mean, I'm not gonna generalize, but I'm also not gonna say I probably haven't.
Yeah.
They've always been somebody with like OCD that has just been really overbearing.
Yeah.
Like I'm just thinking back in like high school. It's like, yeah. Where I worked with a Natalie once.
Yeah.
And she would just always email people like on an like it felt like an hourly basis, like trying to make sure the project was ready.
Yeah. No, I get that. Yeah, it's kind of funny, because like going back to like the name meaning thing, so in Japanese, because you have kanji for your names, so you know what your name means, and you can kind of pick it out. But a lot of these names like Austin, Arthur, Peter, you don't actually know what they mean because they normally come from other languages, and it's changed so long that people will pick a name because they think it sounds nice.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think something that I think is really different between Japanese names and I'm just going to say like English names is that kind of building off what you said, the English names often come from other countries. Yeah. And a big reason for that is because England is not a unique culture. Yeah. England is basically like the child of like every country in Europe. Yeah. Because basically, if you look at the history, like England was conquered by almost every single country in Europe.
Around it, yeah.
Yeah. And so, like the English language, it's really weird because there's really no other language like English language. Yeah. Every other one has like a really deep-rooted history. But I mean, British people, you go back like, I don't know, 2,000 years, and we were just a bunch of cavemen. Yeah. Yeah. We were just cavemen living up in the forests and friggin' dancing around fires and like trying to do all these pagan rituals. And then like, the Romans came up and like, you guys are a bunch of idiots. We're going to civilize you. So, and then basically every country did that too. And then now you have English.
Yeah. Like it's funny because originally there were the Celts in England. Yeah. And then the Romans came in and kind of took over everything. That's where the word London comes from. That's from Roman. And then after the Romans left, the Germans came in and had their way. Yeah. Then the Germans still stay there, but then the Vikings from the north came in, But it's funny because of that, because of those cultural changes, this is not a person's name, but a place name. Yeah. Have you heard about Pendle Hill before? It's a hill outside of London or southern England, but it's called Pendle Hill. Yeah. So apparently pen is a Celtic word for hill. Yeah. And the people, they were like, oh, let's just call this Pendle. But then as time goes on, because putting like a D there makes it easier to pronounce that. And so they started calling it Pendle instead of Pen Hill. But then as time goes on, people forgot that Pendle originally meant Pen Hill. Yeah. So then they just put hill at the end. So it's like, now they call it Pendle Hill. So it's like hill, because you forget it, right?
Oh, that's fun. Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy how much English has changed as a language. Yeah. So recently I've been like really interested in watching this YouTube channel that
what's the name?
The name's escaping me. Okay. But what they do is they take Shakespearean literature and a lot of like the letters that he wrote. Yeah. And they go through this kind of like investigation on what that actually sounded like for a person to talk. Okay. And basically it's like Shakespeare wasn't even alive that long ago if you think about it. It was like what, 300, 400
years ago.
Something like that, right? And if you think about that on the grand scheme of things, it's not that long. Yeah. But a person, like if one of us were to go back, we wouldn't be able to talk to anybody. Yeah. Like the English is like literally a just completely different language that you wouldn't even recognize. Yeah. And it's so crazy to know, like, you always hear this question of like, why is it that, that English is I would argue is the dominant language in the world. You could argue that Arabic and Spanish, and obviously it's Chinese by population, right? But if you talk about like the power of languages, English is probably the most powerful language in the world. Mm-hmm. And a big reason for that and why it's able to dominate languages when it enters a country is because of how rapidly the language evolves.
Yeah, right.
Like, there's very few languages in the world that evolve as quickly as English does. It's so much so that it actually ends up strangling out a lot of local languages. A really big example of that is French. French is actually a dying language now.
Yeah, I believe it. Because they don't want to take on English.
Well, not only that, but you look at whether a language is growing or dying based off of their ability to create words.
Yeah.
And English is really easy. Like people create words for English all the time, so much so that, I mean, even going back like a decade or two, like the way people talk is very different.
Yeah, right.
But you look at like, French, the languages that end up kind of dying are usually kind of taking in these foreign words, but English is built off foreign words, right. So it's like that doesn't even matter.
Yeah, well, they have like, so in France they have something called l'Académie Française, which is basically a bureau made to preserve the French language, so that no new words come in. Japanese, I would say, kind of has that issue, but it's also able to evolve a little bit just because of katakana. Yeah, right. So, Japan's taken in a lot of English words, but the thing with those English words is like they get changed so much by katakana that often if someone says that word while in another country, no one has any idea what that person's talking. What is an air cone? Yeah, air cone. Air cone. What is that? Yeah, right. No one knows. Right. Although apparently Guam, they say aircon in Guam. It's actually really common in the UK also. Oh, really? Aircon? Yeah, I learned this. Oh, cool. Yeah, because I was talking to my British friend and they're like, oh, actually, we say aircon also. Really? It's like, well, that's weird. Okay, well, I knew there was something weird about you guys. So final question on this topic, but so we talk about our names. What are your plans for naming your kids, and how are you going to choose your name? Well, so recently, my first daughter's named Luna, and I think something that's been really popular, probably in our generation, is trying to assign like a meaning to your child's name. Yeah. Whereas I think a decade or two before our generation was kind of just popular to pick like the trendy name. Yeah, right. So I'm still in discussion with my wife about this, but I really want to do solar names. Solar names, okay. So you're gonna do sun next? Yeah. So I'm not a huge fan of Tayo. Tayo. But is that an actual name in Japan? Oh wow. Yeah, there's actually a kid in my class named Tayo. Really? But I'm not a huge fan of it, but I really like Sol. Sol, yeah. So if we have a son, I really like Sol. Yeah. If we have another girl, like a really common name that you'll hear well, I shouldn't say common, but you see it as Tara. Tara, yeah. So if I have a daughter, I like Tara, and it'll be like Earth. Yeah, it's Earth. Yeah. It's the Roman. I think it's Roman. Yeah, Tara. But yeah, so like Tara and Luna. Yeah, I like that combo. That's nice. As long as you don't name them Blanket, I'm okay. Blanket. Oh yeah. Do you know who? I know. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So for me, if I have a boy, the first name is up for grabs. I don't really care because I have my firstborn son already, and that's Lewis. Yeah. Arthur. But if it's a son, his middle name is going to have to be Arthur. That's decided. Sure. So I'm like, okay, he's going to have a middle name of Arthur. So nuts me, you can pick the name. Yeah. But then if it's a girl, I think I would name, like I would, so in my family, we do middle names as someone who is like important in your life, I guess, for girls. Yeah. So my mom's middle name is Victoria, and named after her aunt. Yeah. So my grandmother's sister, her mom's sister. And then my sister's middle name is Maria, which is her aunt, which is my dad's younger sister. And so I would probably name her like Alex or something like that. Middle name Alex. Yeah. That's cool. Interesting. Man, I think this was good. Actually, I was thinking for next time, we want to talk about another Ghibli episode, but I also want to talk to you about if we live in the States, if we live in Japan, should we try to like assimilate into the culture, or should we try to maintain our like American identity? That's a good. I've touched upon that quite a bit throughout our episodes. I think that would be a good topic. So maybe we'll talk about that next time. Yeah. Okay, man. All right.